Good morning, everybody, and welcome to episode 54 of Untold Evidence. Today, we momentarily leave the 2000s and we go back in time a little bit further, and we're going to start in September 1952. The North Sea, the largest peacetime naval exercise mounted by any alliance since the end of the Second World War, is in progress. 200 ships, 1,000 aircraft, 80,000 personnel. Forces from the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, France, Denmark, Norway, Portugal, the Netherlands, and even New Zealand. The mission? To rehearse NATO's response to a Soviet attack on Northern Europe. The exercise is codenamed Operation Mainbrace. And over the next 12 days, the exercise will produce one of the most documented, most multiply witnessed, most wildly underreported UFO incident clusters of the entire Cold War. Interesting. Now tonight, the September 1952 sightings that forced the British government to formally recognise for the first time that something was happening in the airspace that they could not explain. We are Untold Evidence, and this is episode 54. Operation Mainbrace was not a small affair. It commenced on the 14th of September 1952 and ran through to the 25th. The exercise was directed by British Admiral Sir Patrick Brinde. It had been initiated by President Eisenhower. It involved coordinated naval, air and amphibious operations across the North Sea, the Norwegian Sea, the Northern Atlantic, and the waters between Britain and Norway. It was reported in the New York Times on the 28th of September 1952 by the military correspondent Hanson W. Baldwin as the most powerful fleet to have cruised the North Sea since the First World War. The participating personnel were not amateur observers. They were trained military aviators and naval officers conducting a high-tempo, stimulated combat operation in fully alerted airspace. Whatever else they were not the kind of witnesses that mainstream skeptics dismiss as casual misidentifiers of Venus. Across the 12 days of this exercise, multiple sightings of unidentified flying objects were reported, photographed and recorded by Allied personnel. The reports came from American, British and Danish forces. They corroborated each other across the international fleet without any plausible mechanism for collusion amongst the witnesses. Now let's run through the documented incidents. 13th of September 1952. The Danish destroyer Willempos is operating in the exercise area. Several crew members observe, in their own reporting, an unidentified object, triangular in shape, glowing with a bluish light, moving at high speed towards the southeast. The destroyer's commander estimates its speed at over 900 miles per hour, substantially faster than any operational aircraft of that period. On the 19th, 1952, RAF Topcliffe in Yorkshire, a Gloster Meteor jet is descending towards the airfield, returning from exercises over the North Sea. Flight Lieutenant John Kilburn, on the ground, noticed a silvery, circular object in the sky beyond the meteor. At an altitude he estimates at between 10,000 and 20,000 feet, roughly 5 miles astern of the jet. The object appears to be following the meteor. It descends in what Kilburn describes as a pendular motion, swinging back and forth like a pendulum. Now, when the meteor begins circling over the airfield, the object stops, hovers, rotates on its axis, and then accelerates away at extreme speed. Kilburn filed a formal report. Multiple witnesses on the ground corroborate it. The aircrew of the Meteor confirms exactly the same. Now, on the 20th of September 1952, the personnel aboard the United States aircraft carrier USS Franklin D. Roosevelt observe a silvery, spherical object moving across the sky behind the fleet. A reporter named Wallace Littman, embedded on the carrier, photographs the object, resulting in a series of photographs described later as an excellent series of colour photographs. Captain Edward Ruppelt, then Director of the United States Air Force, Project Blue Book would later note that judging from the size of the object across successive frames, it was clearly moving at very high speed. Now, the ship's executive officer is asked whether any unit has launched a weather balloon. None have. The photographs are sent to the United States Naval Intelligence, and they have never been publicly released. On the 20th of September 1952, 3 officers of the Royal Danish Air Force report a shiny disc with a metallic appearance flying overhead and vanishing into the clouds. The Topcliffe sighting is the one that breaks containment. It leaks to the British press. Newspapers ask the Air Ministry on the record what happened. The Ministry's initial response is that the official British line of the period, quote, "We take those stories with a large spoon of salt, old boy." Now, what happened next is the part of the story that the most casual UFO histories miss. In December 1952, the Assistant Director of the Scientific Intelligence at the Central Intelligence Agency, Dr. H. Marshall Chadwell, wrote an internal memorandum titled British Activity in the Field of UFOs. The memorandum was classified secret, and it would remain secret for 50 years until British journalist David Clarke obtained a copy in 2001 under the United States Freedom of Information Act. Chadwell's memo describes a specific consequence of the Mainbrace sightings. The British Ministry of Defence, in his account, was forced by the press coverage of the Topcliffe incident in particular to formally re-establish a covert UFA working party. The group was placed under Dr. R.V. Jones, the new Director of Scientific Intelligence at the MOD. Jones was, Chadwell wrote, distressed by the public attention. Now moving into 1953, the British Air Ministry established a permanent UFO desk inside the Deputy Directorate of Intelligence, known cryptically as A13. From that point onward, every unexplained sighting report by British military personnel would be processed internally, classified as restricted, and not shared with the public. The Mainbrace sightings did not produce British UFO policy, they produced British UFO secrecy. Now we go to the counter-narrative. Skeptics raised several legitimate objections to the Mainbrace cluster. 1. The Litwin photographs from the USSR Roosevelt have never been publicly released. The fact is consistent with a cover-up, but it is also consistent with the photographs simply being unimpressive, exactly the kind of unremarkable image that naval intelligence would have no reason to declassify after the initial review. Number 2, some of the descriptions, the silvery sphere, the pendulum descent, the rapid acceleration, are consistent with weather balloons in unusual atmospheric conditions, lens flares from the sun glare on aircraft canopies, or the optical artifacts that occasionally accompany high-altitude observations made under stress. And this reasoning and evaluation has been used on this channel before. It is a common line with intelligence agencies. 3. Many of the source documents are secondhand. Edward Ruppelt's Project Blue Book account is authoritative for some incidents, but not first-hand for others. Cold War paranoia in the autumn of 1952 was running at a level that almost certainly contributed to misidentification. I see an argument there. These are fair points. They do not, taken together, fully resolve the cluster. The Topcliffe incident was reported by trained RAF personnel with corroborating ground observers. The Danish destroyer report came from a ship's commander with a working knowledge of period aircraft. The British government's own response, the establishment of A13, suggests that they themselves did not consider the cluster fully resolvable by conventional explanations. So that is Operation Mainbrace, a 12-day NATO exercise across 9 nations and 80,000 personnel, in which trained military observers across multiple navies and air force recorded sightings that the official archives of 3 governments still hold in classified files. As ever, if this episode's been useful, please hit the like and subscribe. If we've missed anything, if we've got anything wrong, if we've underplayed anything, please drop a comment down below. If, and it is always a big if under this conversation, the Litwin photographs were finally declassified tomorrow, what would you think they actually show? This has been Untold Evidence. Thank you so much for joining, and we will see you in the next episode, 55.